What if the blood pressure number your doctor told you was fine is quietly setting you up for a stroke? And what if the number they told you to reach for is actually, too dangerous for someone your age? I've watched this exact confusion play out in my cardiology office for over 2 decades. And today, I'm going to give you the truth that millions of American seniors are never told, a truth that changes everything about how you understand that number on your monitor. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to know the single best blood pressure target for older adults. Not a guess, not a vague range. The real number, backed by the largest blood pressure study ever done on people over the age of 50 right here in the United States. I'm Dr. Michael Joel. I've been a cardiologist for 23 years, and before we go any further, I want to ask you something important. If this kind of information matters to you, please subscribe to this channel right now. Your health and your family depend on it. Now, let's talk about what's really happening with blood pressure as you age. Because the truth, is more complicated and more urgent than most people realize. The question almost no one asks the right way. Here's the question I hear constantly from patients sitting across from me in my office in Chicago. Doctor, is my blood pressure okay? And they hold out a little notebook with weeks of home readings. And I look at those numbers, and I feel a weight in my chest. Because the real answer to that question isn't just a yes or no. It's a story. It's a story about what those numbers actually mean for someone their age, in their body, with their specific history. Most people assume there's one universal blood pressure target for every human being on the planet. Under 120/80. Done. That's normal, that's perfect. And if you're under 40, yes, that framework is a good start. But if you're over 60, if you're 70, 75, 80 years old, the picture changes dramatically. And here's why most seniors are either being undertreated, overtreated, or given targets that were designed for a completely different population. This is the conversation I want to have with you today. The two numbers, and why they don't mean the same thing in seniors. Let's start at the beginning, because before you can understand what the best blood pressure is for you, you need to truly understand what blood pressure actually measures, not the textbook version, the real version. Every time your heart beats, it contracts and pushes blood through your arteries. That force, that pressure wave hitting your artery walls as the heart pumps, that's your systolic pressure. It's the top number on your monitor, the first number, the one most people focus on. Then your heart relaxes for a fraction of a second between beats. During that brief resting moment, your arteries still have pressure in them, residual pressure, holding the blood in place. That resting pressure, that's your diastolic pressure, the bottom number. So, when you see 130/78 on your monitor, here's what that means in plain English. When your heart is actively squeezing blood out, your arteries are under 130 millimeters of mercury worth of pressure. And while your heart is resting between beats, your arteries are still under 78 millimeters of mercury. Two completely different measurements from two completely different moments in a single heartbeat. Now here's why this matters so much for seniors specifically. As we age, our arteries naturally become stiffer. I want you to picture, a garden hose that's been left out in the Arizona sun for 20 years. It gets rigid. It loses its flexibility. That's what happens to your arteries after 6 or 7 decades of life. It's not a disease. It's biology. Normal aging. But here's what rigid arteries do to your blood pressure numbers. They push the systolic number up and simultaneously pull the diastolic number down. So you end up with a high top number and a normal or even low bottom number. Doctors call this isolated systolic hypertension. And it is, without question, the most common form of high blood pressure in Americans over age 60. So when a 72-year-old patient in Minneapolis shows me a reading of 148/68, both of those numbers need attention, but for completely different reasons. Meet Dorothy, the woman who was told the wrong target for years. I want to tell you about Dorothy. She was 71, a retired schoolteacher from Nashville, Tennessee. Sharp, organized, meticulous. She'd been monitoring her blood pressure at home for 4 years. Every morning, same chair, same time, same routine. Her readings hovered around 148/72. She'd been to her primary care doctor 3 times with those numbers. Each time, the doctor told her, "You know, Dorothy, for someone your age, that's really not bad. A lot of folks your age run a little higher. We'll keep an eye on it." And Dorothy accepted that. She felt fine. She had no symptoms, no headaches, no dizziness, nothing. She took comfort in the word, fine. What nobody told Dorothy, is that there was no such thing as acceptable high when it came to stroke risk. Her sustained systolic pressure above 140 was quietly damaging the tiny blood vessels in her brain. Not dramatically, not obviously, just steadily, day after day after day. Then, one Tuesday afternoon at her kitchen table in Nashville, Dorothy couldn't remember her daughter's phone number, a number she'd dialed hundreds of times. A few weeks later, she got lost driving home from the grocery store 3 blocks away, the store she'd shopped at for 16 years. She came to my office. We ran tests. The MRI showed small vessel damage in her brain, the kind of damage that builds silently over years of uncontrolled systolic blood pressure. No dramatic stroke, just slow, cumulative, heartbreaking erosion of the mind she'd spent a lifetime building. Dorothy wasn't a victim of bad luck. She was a victim of bad information. She'd been told her numbers were fine when they weren't. And that single piece of wrong guidance had consequences no one can reverse. Here's the truth Dorothy deserved to hear. High blood pressure, specifically elevated systolic pressure sustained over time, is one of the single most powerful modifiable risk factors for both stroke and dementia in older adults. Research involving hundreds of thousands of Americans has confirmed this connection over and over again. The brain is exquisitely sensitive to blood pressure. Every point counts. Every year counts. The number that changed everything, the SPRINT trial. Now, I want to tell you about something that shook the entire medical world, and it directly answers the question of what the best blood pressure target is for seniors. In the years leading up to 2015, the standard blood pressure target for adults over 65 in America was 150/80. You heard that right, 150. Doctors across this country were looking at senior patients with systolic pressures of 145 and saying, "You're fine. You're within guidelines." Meanwhile, those patients were accumulating silent cardiovascular damage with every passing month. Then came a landmark trial called the SPRINT study. It was funded by the National Institutes of Health. Over 9,300 adults, all age 50 and older, all with elevated systolic blood pressure, all with at least one additional cardiovascular risk factor. Real Americans, people like Dorothy, like your neighbors, your siblings, like you. Researchers split the participants into 2 groups. One group aimed for the standard target, systolic blood pressure under 140. The other group aimed for a far more aggressive target, systolic under 120. The researchers expected to run the trial for several years. They planned to let it unfold slowly and observe. They stopped it early. They had to, because the results were so dramatic, so undeniable, that continuing to withhold the intensive treatment from the standard group would have been medically unethical. The group targeting systolic pressure below 120 had a nearly 25% reduction in overall death. 25%. They had significantly fewer heart attacks, fewer cases of heart failure, fewer strokes, and perhaps most remarkably, they had a measurably lower risk of mild cognitive impairment. The brain was being protected in real time. That study forced the entire American medical community to rethink what acceptable blood pressure means for older adults, and it launched the conversation we should have been having for decades. But here's the other side, and this is where it gets complicated. Now, Here's where I have to be honest with you in a way that not every doctor takes the time to be, because the answer to what is the best blood pressure for older adults is not as simple as just saying, get it to 120 and you'll be fine. That is not the full truth, and I think you deserve the full truth. Let me tell you about Walter. Walter was 79 years old. He lived alone in a house in Phoenix, Arizona. He was active, independent, still drove himself to his weekly card game with friends. His blood pressure had been running around 150/80 for years. His doctor, energized by the new guidelines, decided to aggressively treat it. 3 medications. The goal was to push Walter's systolic down below 120. Walter's blood pressure did come down, all the way to 108/64. And that's when the problem started. He started feeling lightheaded when he stood up from his chair. His legs felt weak. He lost his appetite. One evening, he stood up too quickly after watching the news and collapsed in his hallway in Phoenix. He fractured his hip. He spent 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility. He never fully regained his independence after that. Here's what Walter's story teaches us, and this is critical for every senior watching right now. Blood pressure that is too low in an older adult can be every bit as dangerous as blood pressure that is too high, maybe more immediately dangerous. When blood pressure drops too low in someone over 70, the brain doesn't get sufficient blood flow when you stand up. That temporary drop in brain perfusion is called orthostatic hypotension, and in older Americans, it is one of the leading causes of falls. Falls that lead to hip fractures that lead to nursing home placement, hip fractures that, in elderly adults, carry a genuinely sobering mortality rate. So now you have the full picture. Too high, stroke, heart attack, dementia. Too low, falls, fractures, loss of independence, shock. This is why the best blood pressure target for seniors is not a single number etched in stone. It's a range, and it's individual. What the 2025 guidelines say, and what they really mean for you. The most updated clinical guidelines, revised just recently, have taken a more personalized approach to blood pressure management. And I think this is the right direction. Rather than giving every senior the same target, doctors are now asked to calculate something called cardiovascular risk, your specific individual likelihood of having a heart attack, a stroke, or developing heart failure based on your personal health history. Here's what the guidelines define right now in plain English. A reading under 120/80 is considered normal for any adult. Between 120 and 129 systolic with a diastolic below 80 is classified as elevated. Stage 1 hypertension begins at 130 to 139 systolic or 80 to 89 diastolic. Stage 2 hypertension starts at 140 systolic or 90 diastolic and above. For seniors, the current consensus points toward a target of below 130 systolic as a general goal for those who can tolerate it safely, meaning without experiencing dizziness, falls, or kidney stress. For adults over 80 who are otherwise healthy, research now suggests that getting systolic below 120 can still reduce cardiovascular risk meaningfully as long as it's done carefully and monitored closely. But here's the key word: carefully. Blood pressure medication in older adults is not a set-it-and-forget-it prescription. It requires regular monitoring. It requires conversation with your doctor, and it requires paying attention to how your body feels, not just what the monitor says. A moment before we go further. If what you're learning right now is genuinely valuable to you, and I believe it is, I want to ask you to do 2 things right now. First, please subscribe to this channel. My only goal here is to give you real medical information, explained clearly, so you can protect the years ahead of you. Second, please share this video with someone you care about, maybe a friend who just got a high blood pressure diagnosis, maybe a sibling who was told their numbers were acceptable. This conversation could change things for them, the way it's already changing things for you. Now let's talk about something that most doctors don't have time to fully explain in a 15-minute office visit. the silent killer that wears a mask. I've been a cardiologist for over 2 decades, and the thing that disturbs me most about high blood pressure is not how damaging it is, it's how quiet it is. Most people with hypertension have absolutely no idea they have it. No headache, no chest pain, no warning shot. Nothing. Blood pressure has earned its nickname, the silent killer, because it destroys your cardiovascular system in complete silence. While you're going about your day feeling perfectly normal. Let me tell you about Robert. He was 66, a retired police officer from Cleveland, Ohio. Healthy weight, non-smoker, walked 3 miles every morning around his neighborhood. He felt great. He hadn't seen a doctor in 4 years because honestly, he felt no reason to. He was strong, active, energetic. Then one morning, during his walk near his home in Cleveland, Robert felt a strange tingling in his left arm. He ignored it and kept walking. By the time he got home, the left side of his face was drooping. He called 911. He'd had a stroke. In the emergency room, his blood pressure was 178/102. It had almost certainly been at or near that level for years. Nobody knew, because nobody had checked, and because high blood pressure, never sent Robert a single warning signal. Robert survived his stroke, but his left hand never fully recovered its strength. He can no longer do the woodworking he loved. He can no longer drive reliably. A man who spent his career protecting others in Cleveland lost a piece of his own independence to a condition that costs almost nothing to monitor and is entirely treatable. The most important thing I can tell you is this: get your blood pressure checked regularly, not once a year at a physical, regularly, at home, at the pharmacy, with your doctor. If you haven't checked yours in the last 2 months, stop this video right now and go do it. Then come back. The truth about isolated systolic hypertension in seniors. Now I want to go deeper on something that I touched on earlier, because this specific topic is, probably the most misunderstood blood pressure issue among Americans over 60. Isolated systolic hypertension. Let me paint you the picture. You're 68 years old. You go to your doctor's office in Atlanta, Georgia. The nurse takes your blood pressure, 152/71. The top number is high. The bottom number is normal, maybe even a little low. And you wonder, should I be worried? Half of this reading is fine, right? Does the high top number really matter if the bottom is okay? Yes, the high top number matters enormously. Here's why. Your systolic pressure, that top number, represents the peak force your heart must generate to push blood through stiffening arteries. When that number stays elevated over time, it creates constant mechanical stress on your artery walls, not just in your heart, in your kidneys, in the small blood vessels of your eyes, and critically, in the fragile microscopic vessels threading through your brain. Studies involving tens of thousands of older American adults have confirmed that elevated systolic pressure alone, even with a completely normal diastolic, dramatically increases the risk of stroke, heart failure, kidney disease, and cognitive decline. The bottom number being normal doesn't protect you. The best way I can explain it to patients is this. Imagine a tire being overinflated. The pressure gauge might show that one measurement is okay, but the tire itself is still under dangerous stress. If it bursts, it doesn't burst in slow motion. It bursts suddenly, catastrophically. Your arteries under chronic high systolic pressure are under exactly that kind of stress. For seniors with isolated systolic hypertension, the target remains the same. We want to get that systolic number down, ideally below 130, while being careful not to drop the diastolic too low in the process, because dropping the diastolic below 60 in an older adult can reduce blood flow to the heart muscle itself. This is called the J-curve effect, and it's one of the reasons blood pressure management in seniors requires more precision than simply chasing the lowest number possible. What you can do right now without a prescription. Here's where I want to give you real power, because not everything about blood pressure management requires a medication and a prescription. There are concrete, evidence-backed lifestyle changes that can lower systolic blood pressure by 10, 12, even 15 points on their own, in real Americans, in studies conducted right here in the United States. Let me tell you about Barbara. Barbara was 67 years old, a retired accountant from Portland, Oregon. Her systolic pressure was running consistently around 142/84. Her doctor wanted to start medication. Barbara asked if she could try changing her lifestyle first for 90 days. Her doctor agreed, and they set a plan. Barbara made 3 changes, just 3. First, she switched to what nutritionists call the DASH eating approach: more fruits and vegetables, berries, leafy greens, sweet potatoes, bananas, less sodium, less processed food, less red meat. Not a starvation diet. Not a complicated elimination protocol. A balanced, real food approach specifically designed to reduce blood pressure. Second, she started walking 30 minutes every day. Not running, not gym workouts, just brisk walking around her neighborhood in Portland, 5 days a week. Third, she started limiting sodium intake, specifically by stopping her habit of adding table salt to meals and cutting back on canned soups and deli meats, which are loaded with hidden sodium. 90 days later, Barbara's blood pressure was 126/78 without a single medication. Her systolic dropped 16 points through lifestyle alone. Her doctor, honestly, was thrilled, and Barbara was more thrilled because she had done it herself. She had taken control. Now I want to be clear, not every senior can achieve that result through lifestyle alone. If your blood pressure is at stage 2 hypertension, 140/90 or higher, or if you already have a history of stroke or heart disease, medication is not optional, it's essential. Lifestyle changes support medication. They don't replace it at that level of risk. But for seniors in the elevated to stage 1 range, lifestyle changes are a powerful and underused tool. And the time to start using them is right now. The most dangerous myth about blood pressure and age. Before we get to the complete protocol I want to leave you with, I need to dismantle one myth. One dangerous, widely believed, deeply harmful myth that I hear repeated in waiting rooms across America. The myth goes like this. Oh, it's normal for blood pressure to go up as you get older. That's just what happens. You're not 30 anymore. I have heard this said to patients by well-meaning family members, by neighbors sometimes, unfortunately, even by physicians who should know better, and every time I hear it, something in me tightens. Because this myth has a body count. Yes, it is common for blood pressure to rise with age. Common does not mean safe. Obesity is common in America. Type 2 diabetes is common. Common and acceptable are not the same word. They are not even close to the same word. Normalizing elevated blood pressure in seniors because of age is like normalizing blurry vision because of age and deciding not to get glasses. The blur is common, the blur is expected, but the blur still causes car accidents, still leads to falls, still diminishes quality of life in ways that are entirely preventable. Your blood pressure goal does not get more lenient as you age. If anything, the evidence suggests it gets more urgent. Because the older you are, the more years of potential damage accumulate behind each unchecked high reading, and the more your heart, kidneys, and brain have already absorbed. The window to act is not infinite, but it is open right now. The complete blood pressure truth, your personal protocol. So let me give you the full picture, clear, practical, actionable. This is what I tell every patient over 60 who walks into my office. First, know your numbers. Check your blood pressure at home regularly, twice a day, once in the morning before breakfast and medication, once in the evening before dinner. Same time, every day. Log every reading with the date and time. Second, know your categories. Under 120/80 is normal. 120 to 129 systolic with diastolic under 80 is elevated. 130 to 139 or 80 to 89 is stage 1 hypertension. 140/90 or higher is stage 2, and above 180/120 is a hypertensive crisis. If you see those numbers, call your doctor or go to an emergency room immediately. Third, know your target. For most adults over 60 who are relatively healthy, the current goal is systolic below 130. If you are over 75, your doctor may set a slightly different individual target based on your overall health, your medications, and your risk of falls. Do not set your own target without that conversation. Fourth, respect the floor. If your blood pressure drops below 100/60 and you feel dizzy, lightheaded, weak, or confused, that is not success. That is a warning. Contact your doctor immediately. Low blood pressure in seniors is not something to celebrate. Fifth, use lifestyle as medicine. The DASH eating approach, regular walking, sodium reduction, maintaining a healthy weight, limiting alcohol, managing stress. These are not soft suggestions. These are medically validated tools that work. Sixth, take medication as prescribed. If your doctor has prescribed blood pressure medication, do not skip doses because you feel fine. You feel fine because the medication is working. Missing doses does not just lose ground, it creates dangerous spikes. I will see you in the next video. Take very good care of yourself.